Good morning and welcome to Scientists and Explorers Live. My name's Jamie from Encounter EDU, and I'm really looking forward to this live lesson today. We have a fantastic one lined up for you. It's Songs of the Sea, and I've got my underwater world ready to learn huge amounts from the amazing Tim Gordon, who will be on very shortly. Just before we start, a few shout outs and just to see where we have you joining from. Masses and masses of people homeschooling at the moment, and it's great to be connected to all of you. So we have people from the UK, from the USA, India, Bermuda, Australia, hi, Ukraine, Germany, Brazil, Bangladesh, Malawi, and Guernsey. Welcome one and all. And I'm just going to see, just on the live chat, who we have. We have Andrea Stefano from London. Good morning. Hi. We've got Mr. Dutton from Hucknall in Nottinghamshire. Great to have you on here. We have Camilla and Hugo in Bristol. Good morning to Camilla and Hugo. We have we've got people in Guernsey, as I said before. We've got so many. Josh, who's 11, Lucas, who's 8, and their mum in North Devon. Welcome. Cambridge, we have Matilda, age 6, and Charlie, age 9. We've got Wales and Carmarthen. We've got huge amounts, and I'm just going to stop soon. Otherwise, we will keep on giving shout outs, and we won't get to the talk itself. So just to give you a sense of the structure, Tim's going to give a fantastic talk about Songs on the Sea. Really looking forward to it. And then we have a chance for question and answer afterwards. Most of you seem to have found the live chat on YouTube. Do remember that YouTube is really an adult thing for the live chat. You do need a YouTube channel. So get a responsible adult parent or carer at home to post messages and questions and comments up there for you. If you need any help, you will see there's a chat icon on the Encounter EDU website, and one of the team will be able to help you out with any other issues, tech or science-wise. And one last thing, it was that this is an online classroom, so please keep the comments and questions on message. We do have a teacher moderator, just in case you sneak off message a little bit. But wonderful to have you with us. I hope you're all sitting comfortably. I certainly am. And I think we've got Tim on the line. Tim, are you there?
I am here. It's really wonderful to be here. Thanks very much all for joining us today. Really exciting to be here with you. We're all learning all over the world. Hearing people coming in from Australia, from Bangladesh, from the UK, from Africa. Really, this is so exciting for me to be sharing the work that I do with you guys and to be connecting with you as we do that. So do keep firing in your questions. Where are you watching from? We'd love to hear. Keep telling us in that live chat box there. And as we go, we might give you a few shout outs. We'll say hi to you guys around the world. While you're doing that, I'm going to tell you a bit about myself to start with as well. So I'm a marine biologist. I work here in the UK and also in Australia. I've been to the Arctic Ocean to do some work and some in South America as well. I really love my job. And what I do is I travel around the world trying to find out more, to do research about animals underwater, to try and understand these mysteries of the sea that we've no idea about, to understand all of these amazing animals that we share our planet with, and as well as understanding all sorts of amazing things about how they live their lives, work out how we can help to protect them as well. So these are a few of the really memorable encounters I've been lucky to have over the years. Meeting the biggest fish in the sea, that's a whale shark up in the top left. In the bottom left there, hanging out with a turtle underwater. I was having a little competition with this guy to see which of us could hold our breath for the longest. I didn't win. It turns out turtles can hold their breath for 7 hours. So I would have had to do a bit better than my little 1 or 2 minutes there. And then this is hanging out with a dolphin in the bottom right at top speed. Dolphins can swim nearly as fast as a boat. And it looks like they do it with just no effort at all. They just lazily beat their tails and they can keep up with your boat at full speed. It's amazing. So finding out all about these animals takes me around the world, exploring lots of different underwater habitats. So on the left here is diving into a cave in the jungle in Mexico. At the bottom of your screen there, you can see exploring around a coral reef in Australia. And at the top, going out in a little small boat north of Canada to try and get out into the ocean there and see what we can find out. Now, my particular speciality in doing this research is sound. I'm really interested in what we can hear underwater and what that means for the animals living there. So for instance, here at the top, you can see I've got my headphones on and I'm listening under the ice. I'm doing that because I want to try and listen out for whales. And whales spend most of their life under the ice. You can't really see them, but you can hear them. So when we're studying lots of animals, we can actually hear much more than we can see. It's a really good way of finding out about these animals' lives. At the bottom there, setting up a microphone in the bottom right and taking an underwater loudspeaker down, ready to set that up in the bottom at the middle. That's for our research where we work on coral reefs and try and understand how sound is important for coral reef animals, how they're talking to each other, what they're saying, why they need sound to run their lives, and how we can look after them in learning about that. So it's always been really fascinating to me. That's what I do. I wonder if you could tell us on the live chat there, what noises do you think underwater animals make? Because not many people know about this, do they? You see, if I was to say to you, what noise does a cow make? That's easy. You'd say a cow goes moo. What noise does a lion make? Well, lions roar. Everybody knows that. What noise does your cat make? Well, my cat purrs. But what noise does a fish make? Nobody really knows, do they? Do you think they're silent? Do you think they don't make any noise at all? Do you think they make some sort of weird noise we can't hear? What do you reckon? I'd love to hear what noise do you think underwater animals make? Maybe some of you have got some experiences of it. We're going to go to Jamie now, who's going to talk through some of that.
I've got some ideas coming through. We've got a pop, pop, pop. We've got clicking. We've got bubbles and hooting. A whale makes a woo sound. I think that's right. Clicking, 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 clicking. Dolphins click and whistle. A high screech, humming, pops and clicks. We'll come back to you. So the low pitch sounds from whales: squeaks, teeth grinding, grunting, bubbles, glug, glug, glug. How's that for some ideas, Tim?
Yeah, brilliant. Love that. Really, really good. Some great answers there. Particularly love the glug, glug, glug. That's really good. Now, I've got some recordings here of animals making noise underwater. So I'm going to take you through some of those. So make sure your speakers are turned up nice and high. Make sure you're sitting comfortably. First, we're going to the Arctic Ocean. We're going to the top of the world, and this is some of the noises you can hear there. So this is an animal called a ribbon seal. Crazy, isn't it? Do you hear that? We'll play that again a few times. It almost sounds like something out of Star Wars, doesn't it? Crazy. And those noises travel really well underwater. So in fact, when the seals talk to each other, they do most of their talking to each other by getting in the water and chatting under the ice, rather than by talking to each other up on top of the ice, where the sound doesn't go nearly as far. Now, there's a good reason why sound travels further underwater, and it's all to do with chemistry and physics. Now, you might remember from some of your chemistry and physics lessons back at school that in a liquid, the molecules are relatively far apart from each other. So if you imagine my two hands as molecules here, if we're talking about a solid, then they're really close. And if we're talking about a liquid, then the molecules are a little further apart from each other. And if we're talking about a gas, the molecules are really quite far apart like this. Now, sound travels in a wave that passes energy from molecule to molecule as it travels through. So, your one molecule here will be vibrating because the sound wave's there, and then it'll pass the energy onto this molecule, which will vibrate, and then it'll pass the energy onto this molecule, which will vibrate, and the sound passes on like that. The closer the molecules are together, the faster the sound can travel. So that means in liquids, where the molecules are closer together than in gases, the sound travels faster. So underwater, sound travels better than it does in air. That's why so many of these animals are using sound underwater, because it's the perfect environment. Here's another one. This is a beluga whale. So lots of you were typing in and saying that you can hear whistles and squeaks. Well, that's exactly right. And the beluga whale makes noises like this. And some of them are to talk to each other, to communicate, just like the ribbon seal under the ice. But some of them are for echolocation. So you might have heard of bats doing echolocation, right? They fly around in the dark and they make these sounds, and the sounds bounce off things. And then the bat hears the sound coming back to it, and it can navigate it, like makes a sound map in front of it. Well, these whales are doing exactly the same thing underwater. They hunt under the ice, where it's almost completely dark. They can't see anything. But by making these really high-pitched squeaks and whistles, those sounds sort of get sent out like sonar. They bounce off the fish that they're hunting. They come back to the whale, and the whale can work out from the sounds it's hearing, fish must be over there, and it can chase the fish and catch it just by using sound. It's astonishing, really amazing. Here's another type of whale. This one's not echolocating. What you're about to hear is a love song. So this is a bowhead whale in reproduction season, and it's singing to attract a mate. So this is the most beautiful love song a bowhead whale can make. Doesn't sound like a great love song to me. I think it needs a bit of practice. I'll play it again for you. Now, maybe it's just because we're not whales. To me, that sounds like a bit of a screech, but that's how bowhead whales attract each other during reproduction season. And in fact, they have lots of different types of those love songs. So it's not the case that they're all the same. There's many, many different variations. And there's one here that I heard that I thought you'd love to hear, because I think it sounds a bit like a broken down car. You know, when you get in the car and it's really struggling to start, maybe on a cold day, and you can hear the engine sort of go, and then it finally kicks in and you think, oh, thank goodness, the car is going to start. Well, have a listen to this whale's love song. I reckon it sounds a bit like that. You hear it? And there we go, it's in. So all sorts of these weird and wonderful sounds coming from the seals and the whales. But it's not just them, actually. This is the sound of a Pacific herring. So that's a fish that lives quite far north in cold water. Weird sound, eh? I'm going to play it again a few more times. And once more. So that is actually the sound of a Pacific herring farting. And that's not an embarrassing thing if you're a fish. You see, you and I would be really embarrassed if someone heard us fart, right? But the fish actually do it all the time. And they do it at night. And that's because they live in these big shoals, like you can see in the photo, and they need a way in pitch black of sticking together. So they do exactly what you and I would do. If we were stuck in a dark room, somebody suddenly turned the lights out on us and we were trying to stay together, we'd say, we'd talk to each other. Oh, where are you? Can't see you. Come over here. I'm this way. And then we'd stay together that way. Well, the herring are doing exactly that, but they're just doing it by farting at each other. You see, in the daytime, they swim up to the surface and they gulp a bunch of air and fill their bellies with gas so that all night, if they get lost and they need to sort of announce to their friends where they are, keep the shoal together, just have a little fart, listen out to each other. Crazy. There we go. As you're listening to these sounds, why don't you type into the live chat, tell us what your favorite ones are. Tell us if you've heard them before or if are these completely new to you. Let's have a bit of a vote in the chat. What's your favorite sound? So we've been to the Arctic. Next up, we're going to hear a few from a coral reef. So on the other side of the world, we've been somewhere really cold. Now we're going somewhere really hot, but the animals are still using sound in lots of different ways. So let's start with the clownfish. Clownfish live in anemones. You might have heard of that. They live in these family groups within the tentacles of an anemone that protects them. They can hide away in the shelter. And as they're doing that in these family groups, they're constantly chatting to each other. They're talking to each other. They're warning each other if there's a predator coming. Oh, get down and hide. And they do that by banging their teeth together. So have a listen to the sound of that. This is a clownfish banging its teeth together to attract the attention of another one. Let me play that for you. You hear that? The rapid knocking sound as they bang their teeth together like that. So that's one way that fish can make noise, as well as farting. They can bang their teeth together. And the reef croaker here in the bottom left, it has another way. Listen to this. It almost sounds like it's playing a drum or something, doesn't it? Like it's banging on something. And that's because it actually is. You see, reef croakers, like many fish, have what we call a swim bladder. So that's a bag of air inside the stomach of the fish that the fish uses to control its buoyancy. It's almost like a balloon in the fish. And the fish has a ring of muscle around that balloon. And when it tenses its muscles, then the muscle hits against the bag of air and literally plays it like a drum. And you get that knocking sound. You hear it again. Bang, 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 as the muscle tenses, as the fish sort of tenses its abs against its swim bladder to make that knocking sound. Other fish purr. So here's a sergeant major. It sounds a bit like your cat, actually. Listen to this one. Hear that purring sound? And then for those of you who are really listening carefully, you might have heard at the end of that recording, there was a little sound that wasn't the purr. Let's listen one more time. Listen really closely at the end for a sound that's not a purr. There you go. Did you just hear a really faint, high-pitched sound? Well, I've dug that out, and let's listen to it again, because it's a different type of fish. Here it is, a bit louder. So that's an ambon damselfish. It's a little yellow fish that's really common on a coral reef. And often you'll be swimming around and you'll hear these little fish whooping to each other. And then for me, keep commenting what your favorite fish is. But here's my favorite one. And it's my favorite fish because I have no idea what it is. I've been studying these reefs for a long time, for many years, and I've been taking lots of recordings. I've heard this fish lots, but I can't for the life of me work out what's making the noise. But here it is. Crazy, isn't it? And it's just that really weird humming sound, and it fills me with intrigue. I've tried so many times. I've been looking around a coral reef and I can hear the noise, and I've been looking around. Who's making the noise? Which fish is making it? I've even taken an underwater loudspeaker and played that sound out of the loudspeaker to try and talk to the fish, and the fish responds, and I can get it to talk back to me, but I still can't work out what type of fish it is. So that's a work in progress. That's my favorite one. Have we got a few people commenting in what their favorite fish are? Jamie, can we go to you for a few answers?
Yes, well, I mean, the favourites seem to be the farting, so no massive surprises there, and also the beluga whale. Although Mrs. Tinsdale has commented in that she feels that the ocean sounds worse than a beginner's violin class.
Wow, I'm not sure whether that's an insult to the fish or the violinists, to be honest. But yeah, really great to be hearing your opinions on that. Thanks a lot, guys. Now, we're going to move on a bit, and I'm going to try and share with you an example of how studying this sound underwater can actually be a really good way of protecting marine life. So it's really interesting to hear all these sounds, but it's actually really important for conservation of ocean ecosystems as well. So we're going to think a bit about baby fish. So these pictures in the middle of your screen are two really small baby fish. They're probably, looking at them, I'd say they're about 3 weeks old, those. And they would be about the size of your thumbnail, okay? Really quite small. And the thing is, if you're a baby fish, you don't actually grow up on a coral reef for the start of your life. You're born on a coral reef, you hatch out of an egg, and then almost immediately you're swept away out into the deep blue sea, out into the ocean. So you can see the picture of the island there. You can see the coral reefs are sort of light green around the islands, but there's all this dark, deep blue sea all around, and the baby fish go out into the deep to grow up there. And that's because it's actually safer for them there, because there's lots of other fish that can eat them on a coral reef. Whereas out in the open ocean, they're a bit safer. They can grow up in peace. And then when they're big and strong and they're ready to take on the world, they'll come back to a coral reef. But the burning question is, how do they do that? Because that can be a really difficult journey. It can be a long way. They can just be floating out in the blue, not really knowing which way to go. It's far too far to see a coral reef. They can't really smell a coral reef unless the current happens to be going in the right direction. So if they're downstream, they could smell it, but if they're upstream, that wouldn't work. But what they can do is they can hear a reef, because as we've already learned this morning, coral reefs are really noisy places. There's lots of animals making noise all the time, so the reef is making a lot of noise. And we've also learned, you remember those molecules were quite close together in water, so the sound's going to travel really well. And so from a long distance away, these fish can hear the sound of a reef and use that to know which direction to go in and to choose from a long distance away, oh, that reef sounds nice over there, I'll go to that one. So it's almost like a real life Finding Nemo. But instead of these fish asking directions from friendly sea turtles or something, these fish are hearing the sound of a coral reef from a distance away and navigating towards a home to settle on. That's how it should work, right? That's how it works when the reef's healthy, when the reef's working as it should. But for those of you who've been checking the news, you may know that reefs are actually really threatened around the world at the moment. So because of climate change, fossil fuel burning and carbon emissions going up, the seas are warming. The seas are warming really fast. And that's causing two things that really threaten coral reefs. The first is tropical cyclones. So all of this warm water creates a lot of energy. That creates really intense storms. And those storms come through and batter coral reefs, and they break up all the coral. They knock everything flat. You can see on the picture of the left, it's like there's been an earthquake or something. There's been a storm just come through and battered everything to the ground. And then the other thing that happens because of climate change is on the right, and that's coral bleaching. When the water warms up too fast, it cooks the coral. The coral can't cope, and first it turns white. That's a sign that it's really under stress, and then the coral dies. And so when climate change damages reefs like this, it's heartbreaking. They go from being these really colorful, vibrant, noisy places full of energy to just being empty and barren and really quiet. That's one thing that strikes you. You're swimming around, you're not hearing any of these noises anymore. The animals aren't there, it's just silent. And if these reefs are much quieter than they were, what that means is they're also not attracting fish back, because the fish can't hear the reef anymore. It's, there's nothing for them to queue in for. So fish won't arrive on that reef, and it will stay like that. So this is important, right? The first thing we have to do is, this tells us we need to get a hold on climate change. We need to stop climate change, and you will have heard lots of people talking about this, and this is one of the reasons why that's important. But another thing that's important is, once we've got a handle on emissions, if we can get the sea to stop warming up, then we need a way to rebuild our coral reefs as well. People all over the world are coming up with imaginative, clever ways of trying to rebuild reefs. So these two people are in Indonesia, and you can see what they're doing here. They've got a metal frame that they've covered in sand, and they're covering that frame. They're tying little tiny bits of coral fragments to it. And they'll tie little coral fragments all over it, and then they'll swim those coral fragments on the frames down to the bottom of the sea. You can see where this guy's swimming down to is an area that's been really damaged. There's not much coral there at all. And when they first put the frames there, it looks a bit like this. There's these, you can see the frames everywhere. You can see small little pieces of coral, but then over time, the coral grows. And look at this. The coral grows really quickly, and you can see that there's a lot of it grows back much faster than otherwise would have. You can still see a few little metal frames, but look at how much coral's grown over the top. It's really encouraging to see. It's possible to regrow the coral in damaged areas. If we can get the water back cooler again, then we can get the coral to come back. But one thing you might have noticed about these pictures is that although the coral's growing back very nicely, there's no fish, are there? And that's because actually there's still nothing making noise in this. Even though the coral's regrown, it's still probably quite a quiet place, if you think about it. And so we wondered, me and my colleagues as a research group, we thought, well, what could we do about this? Is there a way that we could use what we know and what we understand about reef sound to help people rebuild reefs? what if we could take these quiet reefs that people are trying to rebuild and trying to attract fish back to? What if we could use underwater loudspeakers to call fish back to those reefs and to try and speed up the rate with which fish turn up? So we did an experiment. And so this is a picture of me setting up an underwater loudspeaker on a coral reef. And what we did was we made a bunch of little experimental reefs in a place in Australia. And on some of them, we didn't put a loudspeaker there. We just sort of thought, let's leave it. Let's see how many fish turn up normally. And on other reefs, we put what we call a dummy loudspeaker. Okay, so we put a loudspeaker there, but we didn't turn it on or anything. We didn't play any sound. It's just another experimental control. And then on the third set, then we played loads of sound. We played the noises of snapping shrimp, these invertebrates that make this incredible crackling sound that you always hear on coral reefs. We played the sounds of fish. We called that acoustic enrichment. We made it sound really good. And these colored boxes that I'm showing you now, they show you how many fish on average turned up and arrived on our reefs and started their life there. So you can see that about 25 fish turn up when you don't play any sound. And when you have a loudspeaker that's still not playing any sounds, there's about 25 fish as well. But look at this. When we played the sounds, we get double the number of fish coming back to our reefs. And that really gives us hope that by using what we understand about coral reef sound, it might be possible to help people around the world who are trying to rebuild reefs in damaged areas. So we really hope that moving forward, the world together through actions like you and your family and politicians around the world can help us all to stop climate change. And once we've stopped that happening, once we've stopped the seas warming, then we can use really clever tools like this. We can use our understanding about how the underwater world works to try and rebuild it, to try and bring back some of these reefs. So that's what I do. As we close now, let's have a bit of a quiz. So fire in your answers in the comments. There'll be a couple of questions. See if you guys have been listening or not. So can fish hear? How many types of fish do you think can hear? What do you reckon? Do you reckon fish are deaf? Do you reckon some of them can hear, but not all of them? Do you reckon they learn to hear when they're adults? How many types of fish can hear? Pop your answers in the live chat and we'll shout a few of them out later with Jamie. There's another question coming up here. So true or false, sound travels faster in air than it does underwater. What do you reckon? Is that true or false? Have I got that wrong or right? And finally, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked you at the start. What noises do underwater animals make? Have you learned any new ones since the start of the lesson? So I wonder if we've got any answers rolling in yet to those first few questions, Jamie. What do you think?
So absolutely amazing, Tim. Great talk. And so many questions have come through. And just to go for your first question, we reckon as a sort of worldwide community of homeschoolers that all fish can hear.
That's absolutely right. You got it spot on. Well done, everybody typing in. There hasn't been a fish that we've tested yet that's deaf. Every fish can sense sound. They're really good at picking up sound. Some of them can hear sound in more than one way. They've got ears that can pick up sound. They can pick up sound through something called their lateral line. They can even use their swim bladders a bit like an amplifier or a microphone to help them hear. So yeah, fish are expert hearers. They can all hear. Yeah, absolutely spot on. Well done. How about the other questions?
Brilliant. So in terms of, I've just been speaking to you there, but in terms of our air, was that air and water, that question? Remind everybody.
Yeah, so does true or false, sound travels faster in air than it does underwater?
I don't think we've quite got the answers through on that, but we'll as they come up, we'll get that. We've got false. We've got mainly falses coming up at the moment.
Mainly false. Yeah, again, absolutely right. Well done, guys. You're knocking these questions for 6, doing really well. So, and to remind you, that's because the molecules in water are closer together than the molecules in air are. So that means when a sound wave comes through, it can pass from molecule to molecule faster underwater than it can in air. So sound travels 4 or sometimes even 5 times faster underwater than it does in the air.
Amazing. And our last question, new sounds that have people learnt new sounds? Perfect. So we'll just see some of those coming up. We've got lots and lots of questions coming up. So I'm just going to go first of all, Tim, to a sort of popular one. We've had Dervla, Arthur, Harriet, Freya, and James, all about sharks. I don't think we quite covered like shark noises. Are they fairly silent hunters, or are they noisy too?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What noises do sharks make? Well, actually, sharks are completely silent. They're like the silent assassins of the sea. So they hunt by listening, and they've got this really, really acute sense of hearing. They're particularly attracted to the noise of things thrashing around in the water. So any noise that sounds like something's in distress, or there might be a bit of commotion, sharks will hear that from miles away, and they'll pick up on it. So if you're underwater, you can actually attract sharks by making that sort of noise. So if you're underwater and you have a chain and you shake your chain around, or if you have like a plastic bottle, and you know that noise when you scrunch a plastic bottle up and it makes that sort of noise, often that will attract sharks. The noise, so they're really plugged into listening, but no, they don't make any noise themselves. They're silent hunters.
And Tim, that's amazing. We've covered fish here, but during this talk, we've covered other types of animals as well. We've had a little bit of mammal sound up in the Arctic and elsewhere, and maybe even some reptile sounds. So this is from Kai, and it's from Dora as well. Are turtles in on the act as well?
Yeah, so turtles can hear things for sure. Turtles are actually quite vocal when they're really, really young. So turtles will, they can hear, and they can even make little noises and talk to each other before they've even hatched. So in the nests, they'll make these little gulping sounds to each other, to sort of, that way they can each hear when they're breaking out of their shells, and then they dig to the surface and come down the beach and into the sea. So sound's particularly important for them in the really early stages of their life. That's a great question.
And I mean, a couple of special shout outs. I've got one for year 5, National Primary School in Hucknall. So hi to all the students watching there. And your cousins in Scotland, Tim, are saying that you're doing a great job. So there's some family feedback for you.
Oh, wonderful. Great to get the family support. Thanks very much, guys.
But I mean, I'm just going to pick a few of the questions that we've had through. This is from James, and he would like to know, what is your favorite sea creature?
Ooh, that's a great question. What's my favorite sea creature? Well, my favorite noise is that one I talked about before, but that doesn't really count, does it? Because I still haven't worked out what creature it is that makes that noise. What's my favorite sea creature? There's so many to choose from. There's one that I quite like. It's a fish called a sling-jaw wrasse. You might be able to find it on Google or on YouTube or something. But it's called that because when it feeds, it slings its jaw forwards, and it has this detachable mouth where it can almost dislocate its bottom jaw, and then it shoots its whole jaw forwards into like a tube, which it then uses to suck up plankton out of the water. And so in this sort of really fast, instantaneous move, it shoots its whole mouth in front of it. The mouth becomes a third of the length of the whole body of the fish. It sucks up the plankton, and then it sort of folds its mouth back into itself again and carries on as if it was normal. And this whole thing happens so fast that you sort of blink and you miss it, and you think, did I really just see that? Did a fish just extend its whole mouth, the length, third of the length of its body? And it's happened, and it's gone on. So that's one I really like. That might be worth a Google, the sling-jaw wrasse.
Sounds incredibly frightening. It sounds like a sort of some kind of alien creature. A question coming through from Lorenzo. You have these like speakers and microphones and all this kit. Do humans need that for hearing underwater, or can you just use your sort of ears and normal senses?
Yeah, great question. Really good question. Our ears are designed to work in air. So we're really good at hearing in air. We have a mammalian ear that has an eardrum, and then some inner ear bones that pass the vibrations on, and that's how it works. Fish ears are designed to work underwater and work completely differently. But that's not to say we can't hear underwater. So you and I can hear a bit underwater. And if you go into a swimming pool and you go down under the water, hold your breath and shout or make a noise, you'll hear it. But it'll sound a bit muffled. That's because our ears are better in air. So that's why we use these special underwater microphones, because we can hear much better with them. They're designed more in a way similar to how fish ears are designed. So that's why we use that kit.
And Tim, there are a few questions coming in on the coral reef, the coral sort of reef restoration and the sort of destruction and all these types of things. I think if we can start off for, how long does it take for a coral reef to grow back after one of these events, either bleaching or storms?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a really important question, and it's a question we're all trying to find out the answer to. It can be quite a complicated answer because it depends on lots of factors. So firstly, it will depend on the temperature of the water. Coral tends to grow faster in slightly warmer places some of the time. It will also depend on whether the coral's sort of given a helping hand or not. Often one of the problems is that when a reef degrades, when a reef's damaged, you end up with this rubble field with lots of loose fragments of broken coral. And every time a new live coral tries to regrow, if a wave comes along, another loose fragment of coral will, get knocked by the wave, roll over it and sort of smash it. And, and that can really stop regrowth. So it'll be much slower in areas where there's lots of degraded bits knocking around. And it will also, of course, massively depend on whether the original threat is gone or not. So reefs can regrow relatively quickly, but if they keep, if another cyclone comes along, if more coral bleaching comes along, then it'll reset the clock each time. So those pictures I showed you, in some of those, the reef can regrow in, 3 or 4 years. You have some really nice coral cover coming back. Some of the types of coral will grow slower and take longer to come back, but some of them can really grow very quickly in a handful of years, and that's quite encouraging. But it does rely on them having a good chance and not having more damaging events coming through.
Thanks, Tim. And I'm just going to go back to sounds. We've covered reptiles, mammals, and fish. What about birds? Do penguins hear underwater? And that's from Alice and Eve.
Ooh, Alice and Eve, that's a really, really good question. That's a question I've never had before, and I've never actually even thought about it before. It's a great question. I've never been to the Antarctica. I know that the penguins make lots of noise above water, don't they, on the ice, and they can hear there. So I would guess, if I had to, that they can probably hear underwater. But if I'm really honest with you, I don't know. So really great question. Let's both go and have a look on Google. We'll try and find out. That can be a little project for this afternoon. Can penguins hear underwater?
And if there are any polar scientists watching, please do put up your best ideas on the live chat. Tim, we've got lots of questions from Pip, from Robin, from others, really around the function and where the ears are. I mean, when I look at a fish or a whale, I don't see a sort of sticky out ear coming from the body. So what's going on there?
Yeah, good question. So a fish ear is on the inside. You don't see it on the outside. And what it is it's a little, it's almost like a little stone inside the fish's head, which is covered with tiny little hairs. We call it the otolith, is the fish's ear bone. And when a sound wave passes through the fish, because fish's bodies are made mainly of water, if the sound wave's already going through water and it hits the fish, which is made of water, it will go straight through. There won't be much impedance there. But when the sound wave hits this hard, stony otolith in the fish, because that has different properties to water, that will vibrate at a different rate. And the hairs will pick that up. And the fish will be able to use the vibrations of the hairs on this stony body inside its head called the otolith to pick up sound that way.
And Tim, the other thing, we're covering so many different bits of marine biology, is absolutely fantastic. Just a question just came through from Tom and Lottie. We've talked a lot about vertebrates. So we talked about mammals and fish and that kind of thing. What about the invertebrates, for instance, on the reef? I mean, do corals and sponges and sea stars, for instance, make noises too?
Nah, great question, Tom and Lottie. Really nice one. This one blew our minds a few years ago because it was surprising enough that all of these fish could hear and that they were also tuned in. And we thought, surely the invertebrates can't hear. They can't have ears. But it turns out they can. It's really amazing. So, for instance, if you take a tiny little coral larvae, it's so small that you'd need a microscope to see it most of the time, to see it properly. They're these tiny little animals that just have little hairs all over the outside of them, and they swim around by beating these hairs. But it turns out that the hairs on the outside of a coral larvae are set up in a very similar way to the hairs on the inside of our ears. And it turns out those hairs can pick up sound waves in the same way that the hairs on our ears help us to pick up sound waves. And so if you put a little coral larvae in a test tube, it'll swim around. And then if you play it the sound of a coral reef, it'll think, oh, this is a coral reef. It'll detect that sound and it'll stop swimming. It'll change its shape and it will sink to the bottom and settle. So even the invertebrate coral larvae are responding to the sound of a reef by changing their behavior. I think that's fascinating. So it really is a world underwater that's completely dominated by sound. Everything is using this acoustic world to run their lives.
Really interesting you say that. We've got a question/comment through from Sam and Gabriel, who say, well, I go swimming around the UK and I don't really hear anything in terms of the life going around. Is that true? Is there less noise around the UK? And then second question, when we all get to explore again, where in the UK could you go to hear noises?
Yeah, great questions. Thanks, Sam and Gabriel. That's really good. So there's some ways that you can hear underwater a little better. So I was saying our ears don't work brilliantly underwater. Some of the time that's because you've got like an air bubble in your ears, or maybe because you're up at the surface and the waves are hitting your ears and you can hear all that. Or maybe if you're using a snorkel, sometimes you get like air bubbles trapped in the snorkel tube. So the best way to hear underwater, I think, is to take your snorkel off so there's no air bubbles there, and then to go underwater, go swim down below the surface a bit and hold your breath and sort of push your ears a bit to try and get some water in there, and then hold your breath and be really still. And that's your best chance of hearing things. Some places are quiet, some places are loud. It really is anyone's guess what you might hear in different places. But sometimes you can hear the sort of crackle of invertebrates going on, some clicking and some scraping. If you're really lucky, in some places in the UK, you might hear some dolphins whistling in the distance. I've heard that swimming on the south coast before. I never saw the dolphins, but I could hear them. And yeah, you can hear all sorts with a bit of practice. It takes a while to get your ear in.
Tim, we've got this very sadly only a short amount of time left, but this question is from Jamie. And I think it's a really important question. if I can have a follow up, is what's the most common non-animal sound in the ocean?
Yeah, really good question, Jamie. And that's something that is really important to be thinking about as well. A lot of the time, you can't hear any of the animals because you can hear a lot of human noise pollution. So sometimes you can hear natural things, you can hear waves and wind and rain, but often you can hear ships, or you can hear the sound of industrial, things being built, deep sea mining or pile driving. And this noise pollution is a really important issue because so many animals need to use sound as part of their life. We've been exploring that this morning. If human noise pollution gets in the way of that, that can be problematic. Luckily, people are coming up with creative and intelligent ways of doing things quieter in the ocean. So designing engines and propellers that run quieter, doing things that would be noisy at times of year or times of day that are less problematic for animals. But it's a source of pollution that we really need to be careful about.
Tim, thank you so much. And just an amazing amount of information there. We've got so many questions that have come online. We'll try and find some way of getting some of those to you, or maybe we can discuss with parents some form of sort of social media ability to work with you, if that makes sense. I know you've got some in this great age of homeschooling. I think you've got some homework for people who are watching.
Absolutely. I thought it would be really fun if you guys are interested by this, and if you're engaged by this and you'd like to find out a bit more. I've got an idea where we've all learnt about the sounds of the sea today, right? We've learnt new things, but not many people know about this at all. So I wonder if you guys would like to be the teachers for a bit. I think what would be really cool is if you could write a poem or draw a picture or make some piece of artwork or something that we can share with the title, The Secret Songs of the Sea. So get creative, write something, draw something, paint something that helps people understand that the sea is this noisy place, that there's lots of sounds going on, and that there's this whole new world underwater that many of us haven't explored before. So you might want to draw some fish farting to each other. You might want to draw little Nemo finding his way home. You might want to write a poem about whale love songs up in the Arctic Ocean. Or you might want to go and find out something completely different that we haven't talked about. Go and find out something new on the internet. And then get your parents, if your parents have email or Twitter, get them to send it through to us on that email address or that Twitter account that's up on your screens now, and we'll share it. We'll share it on social media, we'll share it on Twitter and on Facebook, and that way more and more people can learn about these sounds. So get creative this afternoon and send in your stuff. We really look forward to seeing it.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for being part of Scientists and Explorers Live. It's been amazing to learn so much about the noisy underwater world and the songs of the sea. Thank you also to everyone who has been taking part on the live chat and who's been watching at home. It's been really wonderful to have your amazing questions. I know there's questions I haven't answered and shout outs I haven't given. There have been so many. I hope you forgive me. Please do. Please do join us for the rest of the week of Scientists and Explorers Live. We've got some great talks coming up on clownfish, penguins, water, and the problem of ocean acidification. Is it more like a lemon or more like soap? We'll find out all of that over the next few days, but it remains to say thank you, Tim, once more. Thank you again. And it's goodbye to everybody who's watching from home. Goodbye.
Bye.